I think it's a passionate debate. There's been some fantastic contributions and speeches. I am, however, unnerved by the demands that we open our borders, one member even demanding that anyone who wants to come must be enabled. We have to have a sense of proportion here. Of course, I want a system of asylum to provide people who need help and support on the understanding that if the situation changes, and we hope that it must, that they would want to return. But to provide for the resettlement of anyone in a nation beset as it is, but remember, there are many nations in the world that beset and generate refugees, and I think we have to have a sense of proportion about what we're capable of. I remember being sent by the British government to negotiate with President Ghani about a more accommodating approach from him and his regime to the return of failed Afghan refugees, failed asylum seekers from the United Kingdom that we wanted to return to Afghanistan. And his answer to me was, he actually lost his rag with me and said, "I'm a war president. My concern must be with the men and women who are taking the fight to the Taliban, rather than having at the top of my in tray concern about those who've chosen to flee." Now, of course, he undermines all that himself by fleeing himself. But nevertheless, I think we have to accept that, the people of Afghanistan, some of them have been so brave in their fight against this tyranny. 70,000 Afghan forces killed in this fight. And I think that we've got to support them in the continuation of a demand for liberty and justice, and not to simply say, well, all right, come to the UK instead.
Now, you made an intervention to the Leader of the Opposition earlier today, saying making a similar case, saying that perhaps we should have more sympathy for those who remain to fight. What did you make of his response?
Well, I think he misunderstood. I think he took it as a personal criticism that I was attempting to goad him. That was certainly the way I took his response. I wasn't. I was simply making the point that, if we were overthrown by a ghastly, vicious, brutal regime, the question we would all have to ask ourselves is, do we stay and resist, or do we flee? And that is something that we haven't had to confront, and I have every sympathy with people in Afghanistan who are having to make that decision. And clearly some have got to go or they'll be killed horribly. But I think that we have to have a sense that the duty of most Afghans will be to hang on in their country and see what they can do to save it, as we would here.
20,000 Afghan refugees to this country in the next 5 years. Is that a sensible position that the government has taken?
I think that is reasonable, but we've been beset with demands today to, vastly, hundreds of thousands have been spoken of. Britain is full. The biggest issue in my post bag in the New Forest is the shortage of housing. People who haven't got anywhere to live. And yet we're opening the doors to a great many more.